actually a pretty cool groove. I might even try to play along with it. If I could figure out what time it's in. If only I had some good tips on how to do that. Oh well, let's see what Matt and Jeremy have to talk about today.
What do we have to talk about today? Well, if you guys are listening to this podcast in sequence, as we so recommend you do, you've already heard episode number 3, Rhythm. We talked about compound meter, we talked about simple meter. We also talked about time signatures or meter signatures, and how to identify them if you're looking at a piece of music. We're now going to take that discussion a little bit further. Say you're playing with a bunch of musicians, you want to be on the same page as them rhythmically and tonally. We're going to discuss how to do that rhythmically. And a lot of that is going to have to do with being able to identify what meter or what time signature you're in just by listening to a piece of music. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on that, and then afterwards we're going to have a little discussion on some examples of odd time signatures in classical music and in pop music. So again, if you haven't heard episode 3 yet, I would go ahead and give it a review unless you already have a good knowledge on the rudiments of rhythm. All right, Matt, let's get right into it.
A lot of people have asked me about this. How do I know that I'm in 4/4? And not something else. A really big one is, what's the difference between 3/4 and 6/8?
Right.
To so many people, it's just, it's almost like a speed thing. They think, well, if it's going fast enough, it must be 6/8. The difference is all in those stressed and unstressed syllables. Remember, 3/4 will have a stressed and 2 unstressed accents on the beat, whereas 6/8 is only going to have a stressed and unstressed. It's much more like 2/4 actually than 3/4. It's just been divided in 2/4 divided into 3 rather than divided into 2.
That each beat of the 2/4 would be divided into 3, right?
Right.
So to kind of point it out, if I'm snapping here. 1 2 1 2. There's your 2/4, right?
Right. Yeah.
6/8.
Right. Yeah. Versus 3/4, which would be, like you said, like the waltz kind of rhythm.
Like 1 2 3 2 2 3.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's just a different level of stress. So obviously, depending on how much stress is put on each beat, it determines things like slow 6/8, fast 3/4. Perfect example. The difference between 4/4 and 2/4. Very difficult if you're not listening for stresses. So all of this brings up the question, how do you know where an accent is? So what are some good ways to discover the accent in a piece of music that you're listening to?
I honestly, and this is not 100% every time, but a good bet is to listen for that kick drum. If you're listening to something with drums, that kick drum will usually tell you where the beat is, or it's usually a beat or a note that's just a little bit louder than all the other notes.
Right. Chord changes, too. Chord changes tend to happen on the 1. In 4/4, they may happen on the 1 and the 3. So listen for the chord changes. Listen for the beginnings and endings of phrases. And this is useful in classical music as well, because those things usually correspond to where the stresses fall. Listen for the perfect fourth up to the tonic. 5-1, definitely can give you a chance that when you hit that 1, if you're on a tonic chord, then unless somebody's done something weird, you can probably sort of think that you're on the downbeat.
Right.
At that point.
Music on the level as we're describing it now, for our purposes right now.
Right, and there are composers out there who have deliberately tried to disguise the meter and the rhythm so that you're not paying attention to it, and they're working against you if you're sitting there trying to find what meter it's in.
Right.
But a lot of music also does not do that, and it's important to be able to hear. Of course, if you have the sheet music in front of you, then there's the tempo and the time signature and everything, and there's no question. But it also can be important to hear these for a number of reasons, not the least of which is you're going to have to do rhythmic dictation at some point in your life.
Honestly, I feel like someone does a really good job when they take an odd time signature and almost make it sound like an even time signature. A classic example is obviously Pink Floyd's Money.
Right?
That's in a 7/4, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, which is technically an unequal time. Meter.
But it sounds like such a natural, to me, it sounds like such a natural thing. And that might be just because we've heard it on the radio so many times, but it's that Bum bum ba bum 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 ba bum. 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2.
Right.
3.
So, and you can hear him going back to the tonic note at every one.
Bum. Yep.
Yeah. And that is how you sort of clued in. Even if you don't realize it, your brain probably does. That you've clued into the fact that once he hits that tonic note again, he has completed a section of that pattern. So and it can make it sound very natural and non-awkward, even though it is, an unequal time signature, because your brain recognizes that and can accept that. And so does it really, it's a perfect example of your brain not really thinking a whole lot of an unequal time signature, even though it is one, because it's got something to hold on to.
Right. A funny thing my band used to do, Tonal Vision, just so you guys know, was the band I was in all through college. We all were in the same music theory class as Matt. So we were all kind of, when we were first about where you guys are at, we were really excited about learning these new things and trying them out. And we did this one song, I think, where we had a measure of 11, a measure of 10, and a measure of 9, all the way down to 1, And we were just being a bunch of freaks,
They were the experimentalists, you guys.
Exactly. But the fun part, the experimental part, would be watching people try to dance to it. People can't dance to odd stuff, man. It's so difficult.
Yeah, that could be tough. That can definitely be tough.
We learned pretty quick that people had a hard time relating to that one, and most people would just kind of the floor would clear out pretty quickly when we tried to do those things. But it was fun. Nothing venture, nothing gain, right?
Absolutely. And again, as just about with everything else, practice. As you're listening to music in your radio, try to ask yourself what meter is that in, what time signature is that in. Try to count along to the beat, or even conduct along to the beat. It'll help you. It'll help you feel more connected to the music, and help all of these things eventually become more naturally.
This is also a technique. Using mixed time signatures is also a technique in film composition. Sometimes somebody will write a piece of music that goes with a scene in a film, and that scene is just a little bit shorter than the music is. So what they have to do is compensate by maybe cutting out one beat or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Very, very helpful stuff. And, if you want to ever write film music or record for film music, that might be a technique that you need to know how to do. Mm-hmm. So there you go.
Speaking of odd time signatures, there's several examples in pop music and in classical music that employ these time signatures. So maybe we can start with some classical examples first. And I can just read you the little list I came up with. And
let's read the list.
Maybe you can give me some pointers or some things to listen for.
Okay.
On the way, because some of these I actually haven't heard before.
I probably haven't heard some of them before either.
There's a lot of classical music out there.
Yes, there is.
Most people are pretty familiar with the Appalachian Spring by Aaron Copland. The third bars of rehearsal 46 and 48 are actually in 1-2 meter.
1-2.
So
1 half note a measure. Stravinsky. Crazy.
Who would do the? And there's, I found a lot of crazy things I didn't even know existed out here.
I bet.
When I did this, so Stravinsky.
Oh yeah, that's not going to surprise me at all.
He
Go ahead.
Petrushka.
Yeah, Petrushka.
The bar leading into the rehearsal 17 is a 1 measure of 4.
1 measure of 4. So
I'm sorry, a measure of 1/4.
A measure of 1/4. That doesn't surprise me at all, Stravinsky. That Petrushka, there's also a lot of polytonality in that ballet. Mm-hmm. So there's one part there's this famous Petrushka chord where the bass is playing an F sharp major chord and the treble is playing a C major chord. I think I have that right. And so together at the same time. So it's pretty freaky. Stravinsky was a freaky guy.
He was a freaky guy. Hey, what about the Rite of Spring? Was that I remember.
Yeah, the Rite of Spring is also crazy. He wrote the Rite of Spring originally with all of these accents in varying places. So he would write Hoswas and it just be in 4/4, but the accents were changing so wildly that nobody could really keep up with where the accent was supposed to be. So he went in and put changing measure numbers, so 4/4 to 3/8 to 5/4 to and just every 1 or 2 measures a new time signature.
I was going to ask about that because listening to it, you can kind of hear it's like there's a steady pulse, but then there's syncopation. So sometimes you think you're hearing an odd time signature, but you're really just hearing syncopations on a common beat, right?
Yeah, and that's common a lot of times too. Sometimes it's easy to think you're hearing something weird when what you're hearing strange. It's not the time signature per se; it's the accents.
So in the Rite of Spring, there's a thing kind of going on like 3, 4, dun 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 dun.
Exactly.
It's kind of like a weird, it's kind of placed in a weird place.
Yeah.
Controversial piece when it came out.
Very. They caused a riot.
Love it.
There's
Love it.
Famous mythos surrounding that riot.
So Copland and Stravinsky were more, I guess, considered more, contemporary compared to someone like Bach or Beethoven.
Right, yeah, sure. They were 20th century composers.
20th century. However, Bach did have a movement in jig.
The jig?
Jig, spelled French, I guess. It's the French spelling, not J-I-G, but G-I-G-U.
Yeah, the English translation of that word is jig. Mm-hmm. In French, it's jig.
I have that the last movement of the sixth partita is 2-1.
So 2 whole notes a measure.
Yeah.
That's just messed up.
Yeah, I mean, and it messed up, but I don't find it particularly odd compared to some of these other things we're going to be talking about. You know, it's still
right.
an even number, right?
We're still in even numbers. That's true. We're still divisible by 2. So
okay, people, you ready to get your minds blown? There is a piece called Claro y Conciso, clear and concise, I guess.
Yeah.
By Carlos Chavez.
Yeah, it's a guitar piece, isn't it?
I have this as a piano sonata number 3, the 4th movement. Get this, 2.5 over 4.
Yeah, so that would be 2 quarter notes and an 8th note per measure.
Every measure.
Yeah, and the beat falling on the quarter note.
So let me ask you this: why wouldn't he just call it 5/8?
Because 5/8 would be a compound time.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say 8, what you mean is sort of that lilting compound, subdividing the beat into 3 rather than 2 that you get in 6/8, 9/8, and 12/8. It's just you're using 5. So 5/8 would be 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5. Yeah. Or 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5. 4.5. I don't remember what it was now.
2.5.
2.5 over 4 would be 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and.
So who's supposed to be okay?
Yeah.
So
messed up.
That is messed up. Here's another kind of messed up one. String Quartet, Opus number 28 by Webern.
Oh yeah.
Anton Webern.
Anton.
That's in 3/16.
Yeah.
You're counting.
Wait.
So that's starting to sound like heavy metal.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit. Webern was a serialist, and we can talk about what that means at some point. But
maybe we should give a warning about this piece.
Warning. This piece is challenging.
Well, I know a lot of Webern's music was composed using the 12-tone technique, which is atonal. There's no tonal center. Was Opus 28 one of these pieces?
Webern Opus 28, yeah, serial piece.
So it might even be more difficult if you're trying to listen for the.
Yeah, trying to listen to the rhythm of that's going to be pretty hard.
Might be kind of challenging because the tonality is kind of unclear.
Yeah.
So where you normally are able to kind of use the one chord to find the downbeat, sometimes.
Webern is intentionally masking not only the downbeat but any sense of rhythm or pulse in his music. So listen to it because it's really freaky, but it can be challenging to find the rhythm.
Here's something that trumps Chavez's ditty. This is Driftwood Suite on piano by Gardner Reed. And this is a 3.5 over 4.
3.5 over 4.
And I think there's also a bit in that goes 5.5 over 4.
Wow.
Just think about that, guys, for a little bit.
5.5 over 4.
Just think about that. I won't even try and count that right now.
No.
But here is another one that people probably are more familiar with would be Jesu, the Joy of Men's Desiring.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 or 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 9/8. It's actually a 9/8, which is kind of cool. In Irish music, that's called a slip jig.
I believe it.
Where a jig is 6/8.
Whereas a jig is 6/8, 9/8 has that extra pulse thrown in there, right? Yeah.
12/8 is called a slide.
Wow.
For those of you who are curious about the Irish idiom,
about Irish
genre.
rhythmic.
So I think that covers the. Is there any other kind of classical pieces you'd like to cite that we've missed? I mean, there's thousands of them, of course.
Yeah, there's a whole.
some more well-known, I guess.
Especially when you move into the 20th century, odd time signatures get more and more common. So if odd time signatures is something that interests you, I would look towards most of the composers of the 20th century, not just Stravinsky, but others. People like
Debussy,
Poulenc, Honegger. I'm naming a bunch of French people now.
I got you on the French, but they were really they were really kind of experimental.
Yeah, Boulez and Babbitt were being the most experimental, probably. Who else? Philip Glass, Steve Reich. Yeah. Terry Riley, Louis Andriessen, Jennifer Higdon. All of these people, have used odd time signatures. So the more if that's your thing, then start checking out some 20th century composers.
So those are all some great examples from the classical music genre. Let's skip ahead for some examples in today's popular music, shall we?
Very good.
Now, when I think pop music, now again, I'm kind of a classic music hound, but I immediately go to the Beatles, right?
Right, yeah.
The Beatles, the Pink Floyds, and the Led Zeppelins.
Good stuff.
But the Beatles, All You Need Is Love, that's actually 7/4.
Yeah.
So if you're familiar with that song, it almost sounds like they're interrupting themselves when they're doing the verse.
Yeah.
Love, 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 dun dun dun, dun love, love.
Yeah. It's that extra two beats at the end of what you think would be the normal 4/4.
It almost adds like a sense of urgency to it.
Yeah.
Maybe. Another place where they do this is Happiness is a Warm Gun. And I don't know if you're familiar with this one, Matt, but
maybe not.
Me and my band tried to cover this. And what sounded so simple, once we tried to sit down and analyze it, we'd be like, Jesus Christ, John or Paul or whoever came up.
Hell ever.
I guess John, yeah. There's a measure of 4/4, and then there's a 2/4, and then there's a 5/4 kind of extension to it.
Yeah, okay.
So they're actually... It's not like it's in a weird time signature, but it's in a common time signature where they throw in some weird time signatures.
And that happens.
To add for that extra word they want to throw in there, maybe? Or that extra beat.
Yeah, totally.
Just to make the lyrics work.
Something that Stravinsky is guilty of as well.
Yeah. Another one, we've talked about this a bit earlier, but that iconic bass line from Money, Pink Floyd.
Yeah, totally. 7/4.
6,
7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah.
Let's shave off a couple of beats and go on to 5/4. There's two really good examples of this. And I think the one everyone is familiar with in the jazz world is...
Take 5?
Take 5.
Yeah. Dave Brubeck.
Actually, Dave Brubeck recorded it, made it famous, but Paul Desmond was the composer.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, see, look at that. You learn something new every day.
Yeah, man. But I think I heard it was either the drummer that kicked that off, or maybe just someone who knew someone who had a cool little account off for that was... Who parked the car? I did. Who parked the car? I did. 4, 5, 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5.
Oh, the bass line would be that. Boo doo boo doo boo 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 doo boo boo.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that enough of that one?
That's enough.
Have I?
That's a good song.
Yeah, until now, right? Yeah. Mission Impossible. Here's one I didn't know until I sat down and listened to it. The Mission Impossible theme. I've
never even thought about that.
Yeah, cool. See, and that's one of those places where you're hearing an odd time signature, but you don't realize you're hearing a time signature.
Yeah.
Some of these, especially music students are trying to analyze and figure out to play it themselves. They know when they hear a weird time signature. Yeah. This one's a little bit, and Money, for example. Yeah. It's a little obscured.
Totally.
Within, I guess, the theme or the way they
vary the theme or use the theme to sort of, some of these things that don't sound that unnatural because, when we're speaking normally, we're not paying attention to any kind of time signature, right? So a lot of these more lyrical melodies can really be in odd time signatures and not sound off kilter to us because we're used to hearing normal speech.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Makes perfect sense. And we're only covering Western music. I mean, geez.
Oh gosh, yeah. We really only have the resources to cover Western music. I mean, to get into African music or something, their sense of polyrhythms would be a whole other whole other podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And we should get into that because it's awesome, but,
We shall in good time.
we shall.
When things get a little more complicated.
Things get a little more complicated.
Couple of more pop music examples. Moving on. Here's one I didn't realize. If you're familiar with Mario Kart for Nintendo 64, that's not very contemporary. But these days, those games are coming back in retro versions.
Yeah, they're totally coming back. I played Mario Kart. I can't say I remember the theme.
Well, apparently it's the race results screen. So
Okay,
if you happen to be
I'm
playing
totally
Mario
not going to remember.
and you happen to win a race or lose a race, you will hear 11-8 in that theme.
Oh, 11-8 is actually a fairly common one.
More common than I thought, apparently. There's a song by the Grateful Dead called The 11, which
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with, but it's been listed as 11-8.
Yeah, it's just 12-8 missing 1/8 note, or a slide jig, as you would say.
So it kind of sounds like something's been cut off a little bit. And that's very evident in Primus's 11.
Yes, yeah.
And getting into Primus, the reason I became a bass player, Les Claypool. Man, that guy's a freak. But this song, 11-8, it's kind of like, it's more like 3 measures of 3 and then a measure of 1. Or measure of 2, I mean.
Yeah.
So it'd be like, dun 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 bum 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 ding
Yeah.
boom
Basically, yeah.
Really cool stuff. And they also do another one that we were actually trying to sit down and figure out. We didn't have time to sit down and figure out. I was riding around in my car one day and I figured this out. But there's a song that they do called "The Duchess and the Proverbial Mind Spread" on the Brown album.
Yeah, if you can figure out what the time signature is to that, yeah. If you have an opinion on the time signature to that Primus song, email us.
We challenge you.
Yes.
So we've talked about some weird, just funky time signatures. You're 5.5 over 8. You're 5.5 over 4.
Yes.
We talked about songs that combine normal time signatures with weird time signatures.
Right.
Let's go back into some more unconventional ones. Bjork apparently has quite a few.
Yeah, she would.
She was an odd little woman. That one, beautifully odd.
Good music.
Yeah. Hollow, her song's Hollow. There's a song called Moon, and there's a song called Crystalline.
Yeah, basically just go listen to Bjork.
I know, right? But those 3 songs in particular are all in 17/4.
17/4.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Pretty good.
So, and then Frank Zappa.
Oh, man.
Jeez. Man,
Yeah.
this guy was such a genius. And he wrote so thusly
Yes.
that you have to be a virtuoso to play his music, it seems like. And whatever instrument you're playing, you have to be a virtuoso.
Probably.
But,
He had music degrees.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
So,
Hey, here's another funny thing. I heard he was pretty much straight edge. He never did any drugs.
yeah.
And-
I heard that too.
The music just sounds so much like he would have done some crazy psychedelic drugs. But anyways, he just apparently had that.
Yeah.
Vision.
I think his music was actually too complicated to be the work of drugs. I think when you take psychedelics, you think you're writing really far out stuff when you're just kind of, in 4/4 and sort of moaning a lot, or
But the other people on psychedelic drugs totally get
also
it.
think you're far. Yeah,
They
yeah,
think
totally.
this guy's a genius.
There's a Family Guy episode that deals with that subject in a hilarious way.
Hey, a million Widespread fans can't be wrong, can they? Widespread has some good music. Now, I'm not dissing Widespread. I'm not
Widespread
dissing.
has good music.
But they are typically enjoyed by people on drugs.
Typically.
Well, most music is. Oh, rock music, anyways.
Is music better on drugs?
We're not condoning drugs at Music Student 101.
We're not. It just
Oh,
makes music sound better.
back to Frank Zappa. And Photo to Play. No, not really.
This podcast is
I have
evolving.
dream.
Okay, Frank Zappa.
Back to Frank Zappa. I do have reoccurring dreams that I'm too wasted on stage to play, and I don't know where
Really?
that came from. Yeah, because I've always been pretty good at handling myself on stage.
That's fascinating.
But it's like maybe test anxiety, like dreams where you're going back in high school.
Yeah.
And you're taking a test and you don't remember studying.
Have I
anything.
told you about my recurring theater dream?
Let's hear it.
Dude, this is so freaky.
Okay.
I have this recurring dream. Now, I'm not a theater major. I'm not an actor of any kind.
Right.
I've never tried to be. But I have this recurring dream where I'm at the lead role in a play, and it is opening night, and I have learned none of my lines. Like there's variations. Like sometimes it's because I just didn't practice them, and then sometimes it's like, well, they just gave me the script 5 minutes ago, or something. But I'm always about to go on stage knowing not a single line, and I'm like the lead roll, and I'm just going to have to wing it for an hour.
That's a sweaty hour right there.
Yeah, and sometimes I do all right.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's like sometimes I wing it okay, but then sometimes I totally screw up, and it's...
Email us your performance anxiety dreams.
Performance anxiety dreams.
Because there's tons of great stories. Back to Frank Zappa, the piece we were talking about was Keep It Greasy.
Oh, yeah.
The first verse and solo I have here is 19/16.
Wow.
Uh-huh. And
wow,
then,
okay, 1 Iana, 2 Iana, 3 Iana, 4 Iana.
well, take that and then add 2 more beats to it because then the part after that is 21/16.
All right, I'm not even going to.
It's just amazing that people actually come up with these things, and you have to wonder what percentage of it are doing it just to challenge themselves and to challenge the musicians.
Yeah,
and which ones are doing it because that is the actual part that came to their head when they first.
Yeah, I think in the case of Primus, I think that's just what came to his head.
Yeah.
And, and again, a lot of these, I feel like, this may just be my personal opinion, but I feel like a lot of them sort of approximate normal speech or approximate oration, and so they sound more natural to us than their time signatures might suggest because it is kind of things we're used to hearing, just not from music, so...
Well, that's all the examples I have right now, but I might name a few bands that are prone, like we talked about in classical music.
Dream Theater, definitely prone.
I have that. That's the first one I have written down. That is a very and it seems like the bands that are more technical, more just technical bands, the Rushes, the Dream Theaters.
Yeah.
Tool.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of weird time signatures.
Yeah.
Radiohead, yeah. Immediately Paranoid Android comes to mind. I remember driving around trying to figure that out. But yeah, there's a moment of 7 embedded within 8s, I think.
Yeah. Bands that sort of lean, you're right. Bands that sort of lean in a technical direction like to challenge themselves this way.
That's what I kind of think. Because Tonal Vision, the band I was in college, well, we talked about that a second ago in this podcast. We would do the same thing. We always sit down and try and let's freak them out. Let's freak everybody out. Let's do something that's so special for us because we are the only ones that can do it.
Yeah, but then everybody else is just still drinking beer and,
And just not dancing because you can't dance.
Not dancing because you're right. Let's see you dance to 17/16.
Some countries, somewhere, somehow there's a dance for that, but I don't know where.
Well, there's probably enough alcohol somewhere to do it in this country, right? Imbibe enough and...
People get creative with their moves.
Of course, then again, I've seen people who can't dance in 6/8 when they've had too much alcohol, so...
That would be me. That would be me. Well, great, man. I think that's a pretty good start. We'll try and put examples or links.
And if you can think of any more, send us some comments. Send us other examples that you know.
So I know we might have covered this earlier, but just for the sake of full clarification, if not my own. Okay, so let me ask you this, Dr. Phillips.
Yeah, okay.
Why would I write something in 5.5/4?
Right.
When I could just call it 11/8?
Well, if you called it 11/8, in my mind, at least, you are implying a compound signature. Mm-hmm. So you're implying 9/8, which you remember will subdivide each of those beats into 3. So we'll subdivide 3 dotted quarter notes into 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You're implying that with 11/8 with just 2 more attached. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Whereas that's me. Mm-hmm. That's just my. Whereas if you said 5.5/4, you might be implying more of a straight beat. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1.
So it's not just about the counts and the numbers; it's also about kind of how they're expressed.
Right.
What's characteristic of this piece of music?
Yeah, things that are equivalent mathematically aren't always equivalent musically.
Yeah. Great. Well, that was a pretty crazy little episode, I think.
Yes.
Cool things to look out for while you're studying your music and you're analyzing your rhythms.
Absolutely.
Good luck.
Indeed, you'll need it.
As always, we welcome your ideas on how you tackle some of these issues. We also want to know your thoughts on this podcast so far, how helpful it's been for you, and your ideas on how we can improve it. Let us know at info@musicstudent101.com.